Yo, what's going on, YouTube, and welcome back to Goal Line Hockey. It's your boy, Kevin Forte. And guys, this is a special Power Rankings this week. It is our Christmas edition of the NHL 2021-22 NHL Season Power Rankings, week number 10. And yes, it is our special edition. So let's get right into it. So this is a pretty similar rankings to what we saw last week. There is a new number one, so we will get into that when we get there. But starting off at the bottom is the same as last week. At number 32, the Arizona Coyotes. The Coyotes are 2-8-0 in their past 10 games. It has been a rough season for the Coyotes, and seems like it's not the darkest days yet in the desert, as there is a lot of talk about Jakob Chychrun being on the way out of the desert. We're going to hear a lot of this stuff over the next couple weeks. I think they're trying to gauge who's really interested in Jakob Chychrun. Not that he's actually going to get traded before the new year, but that they want to see who is truly looking to actually acquire him. So we'll probably get a little bit less information over the next couple weeks, and we may see this pop up again toward the trade deadline and more than likely into the summertime. That's when we'll more than likely see that move take place, but that is something we will definitely keep an eye on. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel and you can see the latest on that. At number 31, the Montreal Canadiens. The Canadiens have also had a rough go of things. They are 2-7-1 in their past 10 games, and things have been rough there as well. Again, the defensive mishaps and the just complete breakdowns of the defense have really caused the Canadiens to not have much success this year. There's a lot of talk about the general manager position. That's kind of the headlines there in Montreal. The goaltending hasn't been spectacular, and unfortunately, the Habs are just kind of going along with things. Again, it's hard to stay motivated when you're not even 35 games into the season, and it already seems like it's over. It's going to be a long one in Montreal, and everything with COVID, it just seems like it's amplified things for the Canadiens organization. At number 30, the New Jersey Devils are not looking like the team we saw earlier this season. They're 1-8-1 in their past 10, and their losing streak continues. It's a 6-game losing streak now for the Devs. And there is some bright spots in this organization, if you can look at it that way. Jesper Bratt has had a great third season in the NHL. He had a bit of a down year, his sophomore slump last year, and he seems to be getting things going up into the new year, so that is exciting there. Yegor Sharangovich, Dawson Mercer, they've all played well. But it hasn't been injuries. At the end of the day, this team is just not that good. And in what is a really difficult Metropolitan Division, they just kind of fall victim to that. Same thing here at number 29 for the Blue Jackets. Very similar story. A decent start to the season, a little bit, kind of surprising people early on. But they are 2-7-1 in their past 10, again, on a 2-game losing skid. But really through the month of November into December now, things have not really gone well for the Blue Jackets, and they just aren't that same team now. And we're starting to see them look like the team that we were kind of expecting them to be at the beginning of this season. And number 28, the Buffalo Sabres. Again, all three of these teams had a decent start to the season, and we're just seeing them for what they truly are at this point. Just, not teams that are good enough. Now, again, similar stance here. They do have some players that are playing quite well this year. Kyle Oposo, really a player that I've always liked, obviously when he was with the Islanders, but Kyle Oposo has dealt with a lot. He had cancer, he had some really tough injuries over the past couple of seasons, and he's almost a point-per-game player. One of those guys that's kind of an underrated guy, that's kind of just taking care of business in Buffalo, being a great leader for some of those younger guys, but the goaltending has been abysmal. Between Aaron Dell and Craig Anderson, things look decent for Anderson in the beginning of the season through the first month, and ever since then, this team has just really not looked good. And UPL, Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen in his first NHL season, it might be best that he stays in Rochester with the Rochester Americans, because his development could get stunted from a season like this in Buffalo. I think Buffalo's in store for definitely a bottom 5 finish in the NHL standings, and potentially the first overall pick yet again. So rough times in Buffalo. At number 27, the Ottawa Senators. The Ottawa Senators showed a little bit of promise here in the month of December. Yet, right before the pause, they are currently on a 2-game losing skid. They are 5-4-1 in their past 10 games. So that's still 11 points out of a possible 20, which is somewhat respectable considering where the Senators have been throughout most of this season. Drake Batherson is having a pretty solid season for the Senators. Obviously, some guys on the blue line, there have been some questions about how they've handled Michael Del Zotto this season. The whole thing with Matt Murray. So things are continuing to evolve in Ottawa, maybe for the worse, maybe for the better. But the Senators organization, again, it comes down to a little bit of relying too much on their goaltending, and they don't necessarily have the best goaltender in Anton Forsberg. Again, he could steal you a couple games, but he's not that great goaltender that they need, especially with the roster that they have still. A lot of development from some of the younger guys. So again, there's promise there, and you see stretches like we saw this month. They beat Tampa. They go on a little winning streak. There's some confidence building, but it's just not consistent enough yet. And that's where some of those younger guys, again, we're talking about 21, 20-year-old guys, give them another 2-3 years. I know that's not what Senators fans want to hear, but you're kind of seeing that same story play out right now in Toronto, not too far away. That's kind of what you have to look at as the silver lining to this season in Ottawa. They're getting better, but they're not good enough yet in that division. And again, a very difficult division, in fact, in the Atlantic. At number 26 is the Philadelphia Flyers. The Flyers are 4-5-1 in their past 10 games. Mike Yeo has sort of stabilized things just a little bit. They're not really going on that big, they broke that big 10-game losing streak, but they haven't been consistently winning. And now the benchmark is kind of what we saw in Vancouver with the Vancouver Canucks and Bruce Boudreau. But the Philadelphia Flyers have obviously not been the team that we were hoping they could be this year with all those investments they made. The goaltending's been good, which is just so frustrating that they're kind of wasting a good goalie season in Philly. But there are some issues with this team that I don't know if Mike Yeo is going to be able to fix. And we may see some real wholesale changes in Philly this coming summer. At number 25 is the New York Islanders at 3-3-4 in their past 10. And I think when you look at their past 10 games, again, throughout even this losing streak that they were on, they were picking up points in those games, yet they're not getting that second point. And at the end of the day, the Islanders are too far back where you can't settle with 1 point loss, giving away a point. And they have done it multiple times this season, and it's just, again, I'm going to, live and die by the sword that they kind of got screwed by the COVID situation. But you look, again, at another team that got screwed by the COVID thing in St. Louis, and they seem to be doing a lot better. So you can't blame it all on that. But this has been a rough season for the Islanders, no doubt about it. And again, another solid goaltending performance from Ilya Sorokin. He's been very good for the Islanders. They just don't have the team in front of him to create the success that they need to potentially make the playoffs in the Metro. At number 24, the Seattle Kraken. The Seattle Kraken at 4-4-2 over their past 10 games have not been anything spectacular, but they've definitely given their fans something to watch. They've had a couple of really interesting games over the past couple of weeks. Jordan Eberle, 20-plus goals on the season. You're seeing the goaltending, though, kind of hampering them, kind of holding them back. And that was supposed to be one of their strong points coming into this season in their inaugural year with Grubauer, Joey Decord, who was the other guy? I already forgot his name, Chris Drieger. They just haven't been good enough, and that is really, like I said, kind of limited the amount of success we've seen in Seattle. Their goaltending hasn't been able to steal them games, and they kind of need that in the Pacific Division, which has actually looked better than I think what most people would have thought going into the season. At number 23, I'm wearing their jersey today. It's the Chicago Blackhawks. The Blackhawks haven't done much great, in terms of, the problem is they had that crazy long losing streak to start. Everything with the Stan Bowman situation and everything that happened with that, that's a lot to overcome. But they've actually fared pretty well recently. They're 4-4-2 in their past 10. They are on a 2-game losing skid, and again, the goaltending's been decent, but it hasn't been great. And Kevin Lankinen, that lightning in a bottle he had last year, we're starting to see that wear thin this year. And Marc-Andre Fleury has given them a chance to win some games, which is definitely nice to see. But again, you're talking about just where they're starting from. earlier this season, it's a lot to ask. And we've seen some other teams in the Central get pretty good this year. And I just think it's going to be a long road ahead for the Chicago Blackhawks. But again, we still have a decent amount of the season to go. Pretty much 3/4 of the season. So we'll see what happens. At number 22, the San Jose Sharks. Frustrating to see what's happened in San Jose. They had a pretty good start to the year as well. But slowly but surely, they've been just working their way down further and further into our power rankings, as that goaltending has kind of lost that, that super hotness they had earlier this year. James Reimer was one of the hottest goalies in the NHL. That is definitely, kind of fallen back a little bit. And since that East Coast road trip, the Sharks have definitely taken the dive downwards. And this is something similar to what we saw last year. They just haven't been that great at home, which is really, hard to understand. But that's kind of how the Sharks season has been. Number 21 is the Winnipeg Jets. The Jets have definitely taken a step back. Obviously under new head coach Dave Lowry. Yes, it is Adam Lowry, their third-line center's dad. That's kind of interesting. But that is, yes, everybody's been asking. Yes, that is his dad. So, no, he's not playing first line yet, but we'll wait and see how that plays out. But yeah, Winnipeg Jets, again, it doesn't seem like it's really turned the tide all that much. I think there's some more deeper rooted issues in Winnipeg, and we'll maybe see some of that stuff continue to come out. There is some questions about who is the real leaders in that room. Blake Wheeler, Mark Scheifele. There was some potential drama last year with the Patrick Laine situation, kind of kicking him out of the locker room and out of the realm of the organization. So you wonder if them kind of taking that that dominance over the locker room, I don't know if Dave Lowry can really fix that in terms of a head coaching change. It doesn't sound like the coaching really has much influence on the locker room anyway. So, again, maybe that's just my opinion on that, but that is something we will have to keep an eye on in Winnipeg. There may be more of a storyline there. At number 20 is the Dallas Stars. Really frustrating to see what has happened in Dallas. They had that really nice 7-game winning streak in December. Things in November, at the end of November, and everything was great in Dallas. And they just needed to keep going and doing what they were doing. And then everything went sideways in the month of December, and things have just completely gone sideways for them. They're on a 2-game winning streak going into this little break here, which is good news for the Stars, but there's certain things that you question about what's going on personnel-wise. They called out Tyler Seguin 2 weeks ago. I don't know how I really see that helping the organization and helping them to succeed. A guy that has been through hip surgery, it's hard to really put all the blame on him. And a guy that normally is considered a not great outside the locker room because of obviously certain things he does. I think that's kind of dumb. But that is out there, so whatever. For whatever that is, they have their reasonings for why they are putting the blame on Tyler Seguin. I'd be putting more of the blame on Jamie Benn, their captain, who has really been pretty much unnoticeable. I mean, I'm sure guys have been pretty much skating through him this season because he's basically invisible out there. You also have Joe Pavelski, who came in, who's looking for another contract to stay in Dallas. He's not really doing that much. So where is the leadership there? If you're putting all the blame on Seguin, I just don't think that's completely fair or accurate. But again, that's my stance on that. At number 19, the Boston Bruins. Again, it's hard to place a ton of blame on the Bruins because, through the last 2 weeks, they have been without Marchand and Bergeron, their best players. Obviously losing Zaboral and Carlo and Jeremy Swayman to injury and COVID. I mean, they were one of the teams that was really getting dinged up by this. So you can't really put a ton of blame on the Bruins in this losing streak. They fared pretty well considering the amount of talent they were playing without. Obviously, the latest thing with Boston this week is Zach Senyshyn, one of those consecutive 3 picks before some really good players in that 2016 NHL draft. Pretty much the nail in the coffin for Peter Chiarelli there. But yeah, Zaboral, Senishin, right? And then obviously the other one being Jake DeBrusk. None of those three guys are probably going to be in Boston over the next couple of years. So kind of interesting to see how that played out. All right, so 18. We got the LA Kings. Again, very similar to the Dallas Stars in the sense that they had their success, but yet you don't really get a great feel of where they are this season because they'll go on that nice winning streak, but then other than that, they show really nothing that you could really write home about. So I think the LA Kings are kind of continuing the process along. Quentin Byfield has had a setback in his situation, obviously being placed on COVID. So it sounds like he has fallen victim to that whole situation. His whole injury history. It's been a rough year for Quentin Byfield. And hopefully we'll see him back in the NHL very shortly. Hopefully we'll see him a decent amount in 2022 because he is a very highly thought of prospect from that 2020 NHL draft. At number 17, the Detroit Red Wings. And again, another team that got kind of dinged up with COVID here up into the end. I guess everybody has to some extent. But the Red Wings actually have looked decent, winning 6 of their last 10 games. Nedeljkovic in between the pipes has been very good. And that's kind of been the storyline for Detroit. They locked up Robbie Fabry. That was a big thing for the Red Wings. Some of the things Yzerman's done, I mean, listen, for the Red Wings fans out there, there's a lot to be happy about in Detroit going into 2022. I don't know if they make the playoffs. I can't guarantee that they will, but they're definitely going to give themselves a chance. And you talk about what the Devils' mantra was going into the season. We want to play meaningful games in the springtime, in games between 70 and 82 at the end of the day. They are probably going to be playing meaningful games. Again, with how things have gone, obviously a big losing streak could change that. But up to this point, the Red Wings have been pretty respectable this season. At number 16, talk about respectable. Definitely changing the tide on their season. Bruce Boudreau coming into Vancouver. They are on a 6-game winning streak coming into the pause. Probably the worst possible time for the Canucks to go on this winning streak. They are 8-2 in their past 10 games. So even on that little streak before the Pittsburgh game, before all the firings, they actually did well on that East Coast trip. But the Vancouver Canucks, again, hopefully this isn't the Flyers of 2020, when the Flyers were just hitting money every night, winning game after game, picking up a point, even when they weren't playing their best at the very least. And then COVID hit, and kind of who was supposed to be the Stanley Cup favorite in 2020, obviously getting beat in the first round, or I believe actually it was the Eastern Conference Finals against the New York Islanders. So, this is a similar situation in Vancouver. Hopefully they don't go back to the team we saw with Travis Green and Jim Benning when they come back. Hopefully this is a chance for them to kind of have good vibes going into the Christmas break, and they'll be ready to go when they come back. But you don't know how that momentum carries over after a week, maybe being off. That could be just enough where the Canucks lose that little edge that they had. At number 15, we're staying up in Western Canada as we take a look at the Flames. It's been a rough week for the Flames. It's been a rough month of December for the Calgary Flames. Obviously, this month has not been kind to them. They had 19 players on the COVID protocol list, the most out of the entire NHL. So they really got beat up this month with that whole situation. They're 5-4-1 in their past 10 games. They're on a 4-game losing streak. And they also have had their new arena that was scheduled to open for the 2025-26 NHL season get canceled this week by the mayor of Calgary. So it's been rough for the Flames, and I don't know what the plan is moving forward. But my expectations of what I expected earlier this season, that this could be a blow-up year in Calgary, that could potentially still be on the table. Do we, what is the talk around an extension around Johnny Gaudreau, especially with this news from the arena situation? Is that going to maybe change his mind? Is he going to want to go back to the East Coast now, especially with how things have kind of just completely gone sideways for the Flames? Does that come back into the conversation? We'll have to wait and see how things play out the rest of the year, but that is definitely a storyline to watch for. At number 14, we have the Edmonton Oilers, again, staying in Western Canada. The Edmonton Oilers season has definitely not gone the way they had hoped. The Obviously, losing Mike Smith definitely hurt things. And they were able to weather the storm for a little bit. Mikko Koskinen, who has always been rated as not such a great goalie, actually put together a nice little run in Mike Smith's absence. But now we started to see Stuart Skinner play some games. And listen, I hate to berate a young goalie, but Stuart Skinner has just not been up to task for the Oilers. And this team is not playing the way they were earlier this year. Again, they've won 4 of their past 10 games, and that's been really for the past month here in December. It's gotten pretty bad, and it makes you wonder, going into the new year, do they look at some of those goalie options that could be available in the market? Marc-Andre Fleury,